Greetings everyone. Today is our day 14 of PMP6 exam prep step by step. So today we'll be looking at project resource management. Let's look at where we are through the process table. In our last knowledge area, we covered 3 processes. One in the planning process group, one in executing process group and monitoring, and we covered the quality management knowledge area. Today, we are moving to the next knowledge area, which is the project resource management. And if you look at it closely, you'll see there are 6 processes. There are 2 in the planning process group, which is plan resource management and estimate activity resources. Then there are 3 in the executing process group. And finally, there is 1 process in the monitoring and controlling process group. So let's take an overview of this knowledge area, resource management. So what is resource management? It is about identifying, acquiring, and managing resources. Now, we need different resources to run our project. And quite interestingly, this is one knowledge area that got changed in the 6th edition. In 5th edition, this used to be called human resource management, and the focus was mostly on human resource. Here, in this 6th edition, this has been expanded to include other kinds of resources. So when we talk about resource here, managing resource, we are talking about team resource, which is the human resource, as well as physical resources. So the first process we'll look at is planned resource management, which is really how we estimate resources that we need, how will we acquire, and how we will manage those resources, both physical and team resources. So this is really the roadmap, the plan, how we are going to do that. So once we have that plan in place, we move to the next process, which is estimate activity resource. So essentially, we are going to find out how much resource we need, what resource we need for each of this activity. Again, when we compare with the 5th edition, this particular process was in the cost management in the 5th edition, but this has been, I think, rightly brought into the resource management knowledge area. Then, after we have estimated, we look into acquiring resources. Basically, the process of obtaining the team and other physical resources. So we have estimated what resource we need, and then we go and get those resources. Once we have that, then we'll look at a resource that will focus on the team resource. And essentially what we'll look at is how we develop the team. How we develop the team and what we really do to develop the team, as well as how we create the environment and where people can synergize. There is a synergy in this environment, team environment. And then we'll look at managing or manage team resource or process, which is about tracking performance of the members and resolving issues. There will be conflicts in projects, which is inevitable. How we go about resolving such conflicts. And if there are changes, how we handle those changes. These are things that we'll look at in managed team process. And finally, we look at the control resource, where, as we have seen in controlling, we are trying to move forward in accordance to the plan. And when there is a gap, we try to correct that gap. So here what we're going to do is we are going to ensure the allocation and performance of resource usage. So there should not be a gap, and we should have resource when we need for the project. Now, resource management, there are some considerations or key points. As we have said, this knowledge area deals with both team and physical resources. So there are different kinds of resources, but both team and physical resources is what makes a project. Of course, it depends from project to project, where the team content, team resource content will be much, much more in some, and in others, maybe there will be a significant physical resource content. Then when it comes to the team, we'll be acquiring, we'll manage, we motivate, we empower this team. Because team, the way you acquire, if you have to acquire the right skills, right people, you have to manage them, keep them motivated, and only then you will find your project, the productivity is high. The productivity, the efficiency of the project don't come by itself. As a project manager, we have to put those in place, and then only we'll start seeing results. Resources, when it comes to resources, we have to ensure that there is an efficient use of physical resources, and we'll talk about this a little bit. And then finally, when we look at agile teams, we have to realize that in agile approach, collaboration is the key. And therefore, we have to take that into consideration when we are looking at agile team. In fact, agile team is typically self-managed team. Self-managed team, and we should manage the team in such a way, and we should create an environment in the team in such a way that there is a high level of collaboration and the team can manage themselves. Now, there are some factors that have influence on team resource, and we would rather be cognizant of those factors that influences a team. One is the environment, the team environment. So if the team is collaborative, if the team is, there is a synergy, if everyone trusts each other, then the team, that kind of environment will have a much more positive impact in the team. Geographic location. Sometimes you will find teams are all spread out, and sometimes they're co-located, and that will also have an impact on how the team, what is the kind of the team it is, and how they produce and how they interact and so on. Communication among stakeholders. So how the team, what is the communication channel that we have? And again, we look at in the communication knowledge area, we have to set up the whole communication channels, the communication environment in a way that there is smooth information flow. And how we do that, it will directly impact the team. Organizational change management, how the changes are managed in the organization, and of course, internal and external politics. These are things that also affects the team. And again, where it applies, cultural issues will also come in play. So these are some factors that influence a team, and we should keep an eye on that and would like to take the best use of, use these factors the best we can as a project manager. Then when we talk about physical resource management, essentially physical resource management is about efficient allocation and use of physical resource. Now that depends on what kind of data, how much data we have on the resource demands. If we don't have the information or how much resource we need at what point of time, then we might have problem, because when we actually come to know, it might take time to get those resource, and then my project might suffer. And then not only the resource demands, also what is the configuration, resource configuration, what type of resource that is, and the supply of resources. Now, for example, we are running a project, and we want to have a test environment. So we would like to know much before what is the kind of test environment we need, and what is the configuration of the test environment, how many servers, what is the processing speed, and what are the things that we need in the test environment. And then this test environment, this machine should be available. And so we should, as project manager, we are getting these physical resources. We want to plan it properly so that when it comes for testing, this environment is there for the test. Because if it doesn't, then the project will get delayed, the project will suffer. So the resources should be available in time. And also in many of the other projects, like construction projects, we have to see that the quality of the material is right. If it's a low quality material, then again, the project will suffer. So physical resource is also an important aspect to consider. So with that background, let's look at our first process, which is plan resource management. Now, plan resource management, the inputs that we get first is from the develop project charter process. We'll take the project charter because that gives us the direction of the project, the initial thoughts from the business and the sponsors. So we'll take that as one of the input. We'll take as input the project management plan, more specifically the quality management plan and the scope baseline, because scope baseline is going to give us what is the scope, and that will determine what kind of resources that we need. Then some of the project documents will also come in as input, like schedule. So that will tell us when we need what resource. Requirements documentation, risk register, stakeholders. Then, of course, enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. And as output, we will have the resource management plan. Remember that what we are trying to do is we are trying to put together a plan, a roadmap, how we are going to acquire resource, estimate resource, and manage resource, and so on. So one of the output here will be resource management plan, which is really a subsidiary plan for the project management plan. And then there will be some updates to project documents like assumption log, risk register. These are things that will get updated as we are planning the resource management. We are doing planned resource management. Now, the thing that we'll do here in this particular process is we will essentially identify an approach. That's what we're talking about. We'll identify an approach to ensure that sufficient resource is available. We don't want to be short of resource when we are running the projects. So the kind of resource that we will have to think of and we have to ensure that we have covered are like team members, of course, supplies, materials, equipment, services, facilities. Because if we miss one of those, and when the time comes and we see this thing is not there, the project will suffer. Like, for example, if we take care of everything and then we forget that to actually take care of the kind of space our team will be placed in, and we don't go and get that, and no one takes that into consideration, and when the time comes to put together a team, we lose precious time in getting together the space. So we have to take into consideration all the different types of resources. Now, these resources can be internal. Internal meaning it can be available, it is possibly available within the organization. And sometimes it might not be. And when it is not, we might have to procure from outside. We have to get it from outside the organization. And these resources can impact, in fact, the kind of resource that we get or how timely we get, this will impact the cost, the schedule, the risk, quality, and all the other areas. So resource is a key aspect in running the project. Now, when we are doing this planning, or as we move forward, there are different ways we will represent the data. One is what we call hierarchical charts. So hierarchical charts are things like, for example, we have seen organization structure and so on. So let's see. Hierarchical charts are really the top-down structure. Top-down structure, and these are breakdown of departments, units, and teams. And for example, we are talking about organization breakdown structure. Now, if you look at organizational breakdown structure, or let's say for your project managers, and below that you will have different leaders for different modules, and then below that there are others who report to them. So it gives an organizational chart, what is the kind of relationship and who is reporting to whom. So it is a hierarchical chart. This is the hierarchical chart we're talking about. And this is one way we'll represent this. For example, we have seen the work breakdown structure, and then we'll also see things like resource breakdown structure. So this hierarchical chart is one way we'll be representing the data. Then we have something called metrics. We can also represent data in terms of metrics. Now, there's a very important metrics that we'll use in managing our work in project, which is called assignment metrics. So assignment metrics, it really shows resources that is assigned to each work package. So each work package, we want to know who is involved in different roles for that work package. We want to ensure there is no ambiguity who is doing it, and everyone is taken into consideration. Now, there can be, for large projects, this assignment metrics, again, assigning an activity, can be of multiple level. For example, there can be an assignment for each of the team. And then there can be specific assignment for each of the members. So there can be high-level assignment for team responsibility and low-level assignment for specific activity for individual members. And one thing here to consider is that when it comes to execution, there will have to be one person accountable for one task, because we don't want to have any ambiguity about who is going to execute a particular task. And the one that we'll be discussing now is called responsibility assignment matrix. It is also called RACI matrix, as we'll have a look, because it will cover responsibility, accountability, consult, and information. So RACI matrix. Let's take an example over here. Now, let's assume there are 4 persons or 4 individuals working in this project. And we are drawing a RAM, or responsibility assignment matrix, or RACI matrix. And what we'll do is we'll take each of the activities, okay, because before that, let's define what are those RACI. R stands for responsible, meaning this person is responsible for the work and has the approval authority. So if there is an issue, this person is responsible. This person has to look at it from all aspects that this activity is being done correctly. Having said that, there will be someone else, maybe someone else, or even maybe the same person, who will be accountable. Now, actual execution of the work, this person is accountable for. Then there will be one person, maybe one person who has to be consulted, probably because this person has, though is not directly executing, but this person has knowledge, some expert knowledge, some insights that will be helpful for that activity, and that person must be consulted. And I is informed, maybe this is the person we need to keep informed of this activity, because this person is one of the stakeholders interested in what is happening in that activity, when it is getting over, and if there are any issues, and so on and so forth. So if you take an example, let's say that in this particular project, we have an activity called Create Charter. And in Create Charter, we are saying Anne is accountable, Ben is responsible, and Sam and Zoe are to be informed. So this is what we have put together for this activity. So we know exactly for this activity who is playing what role. Similarly, we may have another activity and say Anne is to be informed, Ben is again responsible, Sam is accountable, and Zoe is to be consulted. So similarly, we take each of the activity and assign these particular roles. So at the end of the day, we know exactly who is playing what role in which activity. Now, so what you see here is these resources are assigned to each work package. The activity that we are seeing has to be at the work package level. You cannot be at a higher level than probably the same person, because it might necessitate that multiple person will have to do different parts of the work. Then another important thing, as I've said before, there's only one person accountable, and that's why you see here in the first one only Anne is accountable, in the second one only Sam, in the third one only Ben, and fourth one only Sam. So, but for example, if you say consult, multiple people can be consulted, multiple people can be informed, and so on. Now, with this assignment matrix, what happens is there is a clear division of roles and responsibilities. There is no confusion. So when we move through the project, everyone is clear about who is going to do what. Supplementing this hierarchical chart and assignment matrix, there is another format, which is the text-oriented format. Now, text-oriented formats are really where you put it in descriptive form, detailed descriptions in text format, and maybe you will say this team member has this responsibility, these are the different authorities this member have, this is a competency, qualification. So you put things in detailed description, because these are things you cannot put in the assignment matrix, cannot put in hierarchical chart, and there are more information that needs to be supplemented this assignment matrix hierarchical chart, and that can be done with the text-oriented format. For example, position descriptions and so on. So a typical thing that might happen is in the project team, you have the hierarchy of the project team or project organization chart, which says who is reporting to whom and so on and so forth. Then this, in addition to that, you will have assignment matrix in terms of work packages, who is doing what and what role they are playing. And then in addition to that, each of this person, what kind of responsibility that they have, what kind of authority that they have, competencies, qualifications, and so on and so forth. So all this together will give you the full picture. Now, when we run the project, it is worth understanding some of the organizational theories. Now, if you look at organizational theories, there are many theories that exist in the organizational theory. We'll pick a few important ones. And this, as a project manager, when we understand these theories, it will help us go ahead and manage the team when we are actually managing the team. So we'll look at some of these theories. One is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is probably one of the most famous and one of the very early theory. Then Hertzberg theory of motivation. We'll look at McGregor's theory of X and Y. We'll look at McClellan's theory of needs, Auchi's theory Z, and expectancy theory. These are the 6 theories we'll have a look at. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it really says in terms of needs, there is a hierarchy, which means our need, the fulfillment of our need starts at the bottom and keeps on going up. The most basic need that we want to or we need to get fulfilled is what is the physiological needs, which is really basic: food, water, air, and all sorts of very basic needs without which we will not survive at all. This is the most basic, and this is the physiological need. Once these physiological needs are satisfied, we need to have the safety needs. We look for safety needs. The safety needs are physical safety, all the securities that we want to feel safe physically. Then we want to feel financially. We should want to have financial security. We want to have a health security. So these are the safety needs that we look for once physiological needs have been satisfied. Now, once safety needs are satisfied as well as the physiological needs, we look for social needs. Social needs are social belongings, the sense of belonging amongst the friends, amongst the family, amongst the team that we work with. So that is the social need that we look for once safety needs and physiological needs have been satisfied. After we have the social needs, or we get the social belonging, sense of belonging, we look for self-esteem. We want to be recognized. We want to be respected. So that is the self-esteem. And then finally, once we have that, we look for self-actualization. Now, this is the highest need. And this really says what a person can be, a person must be. Essentially, an individual would try to, after getting all the other needs are satisfied, the individual will go for what they can do or what is their passion, so to speak. Now, well, this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So let's think for a moment and think, what does this really mean to us as project manager? As a project manager, probably will, when we are dealing with the team, we would start with safety needs, assuming that probably everyone has the basic physiological needs. So when it comes to safety needs, we have to understand that the team members, if they have any sense or any fear in terms of economic security, in terms of financial security, or in terms of safety, some physical safety, then they'll not be able to give their best output. So we have to keep that in mind, for example. In terms of social needs, we have to think that if there are some individuals who don't feel they belong to the group, belong to the team, then they might, we as a project manager, probably we should look at how we can make that person inclusive in the team to get the best output from them. Or self-esteem. Self-esteem is when someone is doing good work, we should ensure that we are recognizing those efforts. So they feel they are respected for the work that they're doing, the good work that they're doing. And then finally, self-actualization is really about when people who have really achieved everything, they want to go where the passion takes them. And if we can understand that, and if you find excellent members in the team, we would probably see what is their passion and try to see if we can map the work and even many very high level work to their passion, and we will really get the best for the team, for the organization. Then the next theory we'll talk about is Herzberg's theory of motivation. Now, Herzberg's theory of motivation talks about two factors. One is the hygiene factor and one is the motivating factors. Now, hygiene factors are the basic factors and motivating factors are factors that will be applicable only after hygiene factors are satisfied, and that will be the motivating. So hygiene factors are factors like job security, working conditions, sound company policy, personal life. These are hygiene factors. These are factors that will satisfy an individual or employee or staff, a team member, but it will not motivate because this is in a way expected. One would expect when they come in, they would expect this kind of basic factor, hygiene factors. So when you provide these factors, this is expected and it will satisfy them, but it will not motivate. Once the hygiene factors are satisfied, then you can look at the motivating factors, or then, only then, motivating factors will take effect. For example, career growth, recognition, responsibilities, job satisfaction. So this comes only when the hygiene factors are satisfied. For example, if someone has a job security issue, doesn't know when he or she might be fired, you cannot talk to them and say that we are giving an award, and that will not really motivate that person, because in the back of the mind that person is thinking about the job security. So an award to that person is not going to make any difference, will not motivate them. So these motivating factors, or rather when both hygiene factors and motivating factors have been applied, have been given, or a team member feels that they have got, that is when they feel satisfied and motivated. So that's the Herzberg theory of motivation. Then we have this McGregor's theory of X and Y. So McGregor theory, or rather McGregor, came out with these two assumptions. Assumption X, or theory X assumptions. Theory X assumption says that employees dislike work and responsibility by nature, and employees would dislike work and responsibility. They cannot be expected to take initiative, and if you want to make them something work, they must be coerced to perform. So this is the theory X assumption. In contrast, when you look at theory Y assumption, it says employees like work. They seek responsibility, they are creative, they are self-motivated. So in a project management perspective, you might want to have both the views, because obviously you will not find people who are purely theory X, purely theory Y, and there might be some traits of either. And then if you see theory X, you might want to do something to theory X traits. You might want to do something to move that individual to the theory Y zone. So this is how we should look at it from the project manager perspective. Then there is this McClellan's theory of needs. Now, McClellan theory of needs, it says that our needs, basically our needs that we have is acquired over time. Over years, over a long time it is acquired, and it's acquired, the way it gets acquired is by experiences that we have gone through. It is shaped by experience. And there are three primary categories of such needs. One is the achievement, need to achieve. One is power, need to have power. And one is need to have affiliation. So what it really means is need to achievement is if someone is having that need, means that person wants to achieve. Nothing else matters, but when they do a job and succeeds, that is the best thing that happens to them. They get motivated when they have successfully done something. People who have the need for power, they get motivated when they have authority. They have power. That's when they get motivated. And the people who have need for affiliation, they work best in a team. They are the best people to be collaborating with. They can make people work together, and that's the kind of people who have the need for affiliation. So in effect, what happens when you manage a team, it is not, typically it is not that a person will have one or the other. It is mostly, you'll find there is, it's a combination of all three, and probably one of them will be more dominant, one or two will be more dominant. Now, when you look at some team member, and if you can understand what is the dominant need, you will be able to probably provide them activities and tasks that suit their need. And that is when you will get the best output. So this is how a McClellan theory of needs can be helpful. Then we have this theory called Auchi's theory Z. Now, this theory is really based on Japanese style of management. Now, if you see that, it's theory Z, which is in contrast to theory X and Y. Now, it's Japanese style of management where employees are loyal, have a lifetime loyalty to the company, and the company has a lifetime loyalty to the employees. So it basically, this theory promotes strong corporate culture and employee loyalty. So there is a strong loyalty, as we have said, and by this theory it says the aim should be for the company to increase workers' knowledge of the company. Why is that? Because we are looking at employees or the workers as someone who will contribute in the whole lifetime to the company. So it's better that they understand the company, so they will be able to serve better. And have employees participate in company decisions. And so they become part of the company. They decide on make decisions, participate in company decision. So they have that ownership, sense of ownership in the company, and that's when they'll be they'll have initiative and they'll perform better. And finally, the underlying principle here is that employee stability leads to high productivity. In other words, when people stay in the company, people don't go on, there is not a lot of turnover, then there will be high productivity. And then finally, we look at the expectancy theory. Now, expectancy theory says there are three different factors that actually leads to high motivation. The first one is called high expectancy. High expectancy says when you give a work to a worker, workers know that if they try, they can perform. So it should be reachable. So that is a factor. And when this worker have that work that is reachable, and that worker perceives that when they do that work and there will be high performance and it will lead to some outcomes, and this outcome will result, and they desire that outcome that is resulting from high performance, which is the high valency. All these three things together will lead to high motivation. So there are three factors: high expectancy, high instrumentality, high valence, and they lead to high motivation. If we take an example, let's say in a company there is a sales rep and they have given a target, for example, 500,000 sales. Now, whatever that number is, that should be reachable. If it is not reachable, then it fails the high expectancy test and it will not be effective. Now, once this is reachable, then whatever the performance they get, the outcome from that performance for this sales of 500,000, then they might be getting whatever percentage of sales commission, and that is the outcome based on high performance. Now, whatever that outcome they're getting, that should be desirable, which is the high valence. And when all these three comes together, that is when that sales rep will be highly motivated to go ahead and get more and more sales. So this expectancy theory talks about high expectancy, high instrumentality, high valence, and that leads to high motivation. Now, in this planned resource management, we'll have two key outputs. One is the plan itself, resource management plan. Over here, we'll have identification of resources, basically how or what is the method we'll use to identify the resources that will be required, different types of resources that will be required for the project. Then how will we go about acquiring the resources? This is what will be put together in this plan. Then what is the roles and responsibilities we are talking about? The roles, authorities for the team members, what kind of authority, and then responsibility, what is the responsibility, what is the competence, that is also what will be put together in this resource management plan. Then we'll put together the project organizational chart, where, as we have seen, how the project is structured. That is also something that will be put together in this plan. Then this team resource management. Team resource management is how the resources will be acquired, and then when they'll be managed, how they'll be managed, and how they'll be released. So all this will also be put together, because what we don't want is the resources are lying in the project, though the project has got over. So we have to plan how we are managing the resource through the life cycle of the project. Then what is the training, or what will be the strategy for our training when we have the resources, and how will we develop the team? And in terms of the physical resource, how will you control those physical resources so that they are efficiently used, so that their resources are always available to the project when we need it, and we are never short of resources. At the same time, we don't want to have too much inventory, because if there are inventory, it really costs, and this cost will hit the project. And of course, how will we recognize how will we go about giving the awards? so that it is most effective in motivating the team. Another key output will be the team charter. Now, team charter is really a guideline how the team will interact, what are the guideline for the behavior of the team. So there will be things like team values. What are the values that drives us as a team? Is it, we might say that, it has to be collaborative, it has to be transparent, information has to be transparent. Then what is the communication? How the communication will be, if there are conflicts, how the conflicts will be resolved, and so on. So then if a decision has to be made, what are the decision, how will we go about making decision? What is the criteria? What is the process? Then, like we said, if there are conflict resolution process and meeting guidelines. So in a meeting, what kind of approach should we take to actually go about meeting? For example, you might put a guideline saying that no phones will be allowed in the meeting, because you have seen from your experience it is a distraction, and so that people don't come to the meeting and start seeing their Facebook and things like that. So you might put that in the team charter as meeting guideline. So typically what happens, and of course some team agreements. So typically what happens when you put the team charter in place, that smoothens the interaction, and at a very early stage it dampens many of the possible conflicts. So it makes the team run smooth when we have a proper team charter in place, and everyone knows that not only the team charter should be there, everyone should understand that what are the guidelines that is there in the team charter. The next process we look at is estimate activity resources. Now, estimate activity resources, if we look at the flow, firstly, this estimate activity resource, in fact, in the previous edition was in the cost management. And then they have moved to this because, as I've said, it probably makes more sense here. In estimate activity resources, the first input that we'll have is the project management plan, and more specifically resource management plan and scope baseline, because that is what will be able to help us with what kind of resources we need. Then there will be some project documents that will also come in as input, like activities. Of course, we want to know what are the different activities, what are the activity attributes, and then what are the estimate, cost estimate, resource calendar, because resource calendar will tell us when the resources will be available and so on. And of course, the enterprise environmental factors and organization process assets. As an output, once we have these estimate activity resources, we'll have as output basis of estimate, resource requirements, resource breakdown structure, and there will be some updates like attributes, assumption log, and lessons learned registered. So this will be the full flow for estimate activity resources. Estimate activity resources identifies type, quantity, and characteristic of resources. So here we know what are the activities in the project, because we have broken down from the work breakdown structure, from the scope, and we found all the activities that is required. Now we want to look at each of these activities and find out what are the resources we need, what is the type, what is the quantity of resources that we need for these activities. This has to be closely coordinated with other processes, because we have an estimate of cost, and we cannot go and take resources that bust our budget. And so it will have to work very closely with some of the other processes especially the estimate cost. In determining resources, there are different types of resources. We talked about earlier also that we have to ensure that we are taking in all different types of resources. So there are different types of resources: labor or the team resource we talked about, equipment, materials, facilities. So all these we have to include. We cannot leave out any particular type of resource. In terms of estimating resource quantity, we will go through the familiar estimating technique that we looked at. One is bottom-up estimating. That is, start with the lowest level and go up and aggregate and see what kind of resources we need. Or analogous estimating based on some projects, similar projects that happened before, and we can take cue from there and estimate for our project. Parametric estimation, again, as we've talked about, based on some parameters, and finally, there will be some alternative analysis when we're estimating resource. For example, do we need, for example, highly skilled and not so skilled? We have to match what is really the requirement, and if it is, what is the cost in each of the case, and so on. And then there'll be other output, which is resource requirements. Resource requirements. And so basically what we're saying is, because we have found out all the resources that is required, so we will put together what are the resource requirements. And when we have estimated, what is the basis of estimation that we have done for this activity and resources, for these resources. And then we'll have something called resource breakdown structure. It is different from organizational chart that we looked at. This resource breakdown structure encompasses all the different types of resources. So let's look at an example of a resource breakdown structure. So this is the project, and we say we need these three different types of resources. One is personnel, one is facilities, and one is equipment. So we have identified at a high level, these are the different types of resources. For the personnel, when we drill down, we find that, hey, for the personnel at a high level, again, we need application development resource, we need project management, we need infrastructure resource. And then in application development, we need analysts, programmers. In infrastructure, we need network engineer, client support. So we drill it down in terms of the resource, the kind of resource that we need for the personnel. Then again, we look at the facilities. Facilities, we talk about, we need a primary site, we need a backup site for the contingency, and so on. Again, then we look at equipment and we drill down and see what are the different types of resources we need in the equipment. Maybe servers, maybe client devices, maybe printers. Servers, maybe database server, application, client again, laptops, mobile devices, and printers. So anything that you can think of. And in fact, this is just an example. In a construction project, you might have some materials. So what are the different types of materials? Again, you can. So the whole resource breakdown structure gives an idea about all the resources in a hierarchical fashion, hierarchical chart that we talked about. So this is how we represent all the resources in the project. So with this, we have finished this particular process. The two processes we finished in the resource management. And we'll stop here for today. And tomorrow we'll take up the rest 4 processes in resource management knowledge area. Thank you for being with me today. And I'll talk to you tomorrow at the same time.